Before the story starts, subscribe if you don't want to miss what happens when truth finally comes out. My name is Lena Morales. I'm 29 years old. And last Christmas, one sentence finally forced my family to see the daughter they had spent decades ignoring. For most of my life, I was background noise in my own home. My mother could talk for an hour straight about my brother's plans, his ideas, his potential, his future, and never once ask me a real question. I was the quiet one, the kid who did her homework alone at the kitchen counter, while everyone else hovered around him like his success was already guaranteed. I got used to being invisible until that night. We were sitting around the dining table in my mother's house outside San Diego, the same place we'd had every holiday since I was a child, the same creaky chairs, the same chipped serving bowls, Christmas lights blinking in the window like nothing ever changed. My mum leaned toward my brother, asking about his newest venture, laughing at his half-formed ideas, promising again that she'd help however she could. I sat across from them, quietly cutting my food like I always had. Then my brother looked at me with that familiar smirk, the one he'd worn since we were kids. "So," he said, swirling his drink, "are you still wasting your time on that little company of yours?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't snap back. I just shrugged, casual, like we were talking about the weather. "Actually," I said, "I sold it." The table went silent. My brother laughed under his breath. "That thing?" He made air quotes with his fingers. "Sure. Okay. How much did they give you for it?" I looked him straight in the eye. $78 million. His jaw dropped. Not metaphorically, his mouth actually fell open. My mother froze mid-bite. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the plate. In that single moment, every year she'd overlooked me, every birthday forgotten, every achievement dismissed crashed back onto her instead of me. And if you want to know how the daughter her own family ignored for years ended up dropping a multi-million-dollar truth bomb at Christmas dinner and what it cost them afterward, stay with me. Because this didn't start with money. It started when I was 8 years old, standing in a kitchen doorway, clutching a plastic cup, watching my brother get crowned king of our family. At 8, I was just a quiet kid, trying not to take up space. That year, my brother Ethan turned 13. My mother rolled a brand new dirt bike into the driveway of our suburban neighborhood like she was unveiling a trophy. Neighbors gathered, cameras came out. Someone shouted that Ethan was going places. My mother hugged him so tightly, it looked like she was afraid someone might steal him away. I stood a few feet back in an oversized thrift store shirt. No one asked me to join the pictures. That was the pattern. Ethan's birthdays were events, balloons, parties, layered cakes, weekends built entirely around him. Mine were quick affairs. A grocery store cake, a rushed apology. "We'll do something special later." Later never came. When Ethan graduated high school, my mother surprised him with a trip to Barcelona. I got a card and some cash left on the counter. When he wanted to attend a private prep school, she fought tooth and nail to make it happen. Tuition, tutors, sports, music lessons, summer programs that cost more than our car. I went to the local public school with outdated textbooks and cracked windows. When I asked why, my mother patted my shoulder and smiled. "Ethan needs extra support. He's exceptional. You're strong, Lena. You'll be fine." At first, it sounded like a compliment. Over time, "you'll be fine" started to mean we don't need to try for you. My father worked long hours and stayed mostly silent. Decisions about money, education, and priorities all ran through my mother, and every road led back to Ethan. By 12, I stopped asking. I stopped asking why he got the new phone and I didn't. Why he got tutoring and I figured it out alone. Why his failures were emergencies and my successes were footnotes. Instead, I learned to handle things myself. I taught myself to cook because I didn't want to ask for money. I picked up weekend shifts washing dishes at a cafe 2 blocks from school. I saved tips in a jar until I could buy a used laptop. At the dinner table, conversation revolved around Ethan, his grades, his future, his potential. I was there, but I wasn't part of the story. Somewhere in those years, something shifted. I stopped trying to be seen. I started planning a life that wouldn't require permission. College was supposed to be my clean break. I got into Arizona State University with a partial scholarship in software engineering. When the acceptance email came in, I read it 3 times just to be sure it was real. My mom glanced at the screen. "That's nice, honey," she said, then asked if I could help proofread an email to Ethan's advisor. A week later, Ethan got into a prestigious program back east. There was champagne, family calls, a celebratory dinner. When I left for college, my mom hugged me quickly and drove off because she was running late. I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. My scholarship covered some tuition, but not rent or books. So I worked mornings at a cafe, afternoons in class, nights teaching myself to code with free videos because the textbooks were too expensive. I wasn't bitter. It felt good, like I was building something that was mine. The idea that changed everything came from overhearing people complain. Everyone was exhausted, overworked, burned out, skipping meals, forgetting water, living on caffeine and stress. One night, sitting at a sticky table between shifts, it hit me. What if there was one simple platform that helped people track the basics, sleep, movement, hydration, mental health, without being overwhelming? I started sketching ideas in a notebook. Simple reminders, clean visuals, friendly nudges instead of alarms. I called it Pulse Habit. The first version was ugly, but it worked. I gave it to friends. They criticized everything. I fixed it all. Users trickled in. Reviews appeared. When the app made its first $900, I cried in the cafe bathroom. That was more than my family had ever invested in me. While I was building Pulse Habit, Ethan's life stalled. His first startup failed. My mother poured money into it anyway. When it collapsed, she cried about how unfair the world was to him. She barely asked about me. When I tried to tell her Pulse Habit had tens of thousands of users, she said, "That's nice," and immediately launched into how Ethan just needed one more chance. So I stopped sharing. I kept working. Years passed. Pulse Habit grew. Partnerships formed. Investors called. One company offered $28 million. I said no. Another offered more. I still said no. Eventually, a healthcare tech group came with the right terms. We negotiated for months. When I finally signed, after bonuses, taxes, and payouts to my team, I walked away with just over $41 million. I didn't call my mother, I called a therapist. Because the money didn't fix the part of me that grew up invisible. I didn't call my mother after the deal closed. I didn't call my brother either. I called a therapist. Because the strangest part about becoming successful isn't the money, it's realizing you can finally afford the life you wanted and still feel like the 8-year-old standing in the doorway, watching everyone clap for someone else. For months after the acquisition, I moved through my days like I was wearing my life instead of living it. My team celebrated. I signed documents that looked like they belonged to someone older and more important than me. I sat in meetings where people called me visionary, founder, brilliant, and I kept waiting for the punchline. But at night, quiet nights, alone in my apartment, I'd open my phone and stare at old family photos. Not because I missed them, because I wanted to understand something I had spent my whole childhood trying not to ask. How do you love a family that only sees you when you're useful? My therapist was the first person to say it out loud in a way that landed. "You're not going back for love," she said. You're going back for closure. Those are not the same thing. I didn't argue. I couldn't. She told me to treat it like an experiment, not a reunion. Observe, she said. Don't chase. Don't perform. Watch what happens when you show up as the woman you are now. Christmas was approaching, and for the first time in years, I found myself looking at flights, not because I wanted to be wrapped in family warmth, but because I wanted to see, with my own eyes, what my mother would do when the invisible daughter finally took up space. So I booked the ticket, and I told myself I wasn't going home. I was collecting data. I texted my mom 2 weeks before Christmas. Just one line. I'm free this year. If you're doing dinner, I can come. She replied within seconds. Of course. Ethan will be here too. It'll be like old times. That heart at the end almost made me laugh, because old times weren't memories for me. They were bruises. I didn't tell her about the sale. I didn't mention the money. I didn't say anything about why I was coming. I kept it neutral and simple, like a stranger RSVPing to a dinner party. And I booked a hotel near the airport instead of staying at her house. That decision alone felt like drawing a black line through the version of me that used to accept scraps. I wanted a door I could close that wasn't hers. Seattle, sorry. Not Seattle anymore. Not this time. I grew up outside San Diego, but after college, my work pulled me around. For this Christmas, my mum was still in the same house in Carlsbad, same neighbourhood, with trimmed hedges and quiet streets, where everyone pretends their lives are fine. I landed in a grey afternoon, checked into the hotel, dropped my suitcase, and stood in the clean, anonymous room for a long minute. White sheets, neutral art, no history, no childhood ghost waiting in the corner. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was nervous, because I was ready. Christmas Day, I drove to my mum's house. The neighbourhood looked smaller than I remembered. Streets tighter, houses closer, like my childhood had shrunk now that I'd grown out of it. Her lawn had plastic decorations, reindeer, lights, a cheap inflatable Santa leaning sideways like he'd given up. I walked up the front steps and the door opened before I knocked. My mom stood there in a holiday apron, cheeks pink from the kitchen heat. For half a second, I saw the mother I used to chase. Then her eyes flicked over me like she was evaluating a stranger's outfit. "Lena," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. Polite, short. "You look grown." Then, immediately, "So work's still going okay? Still doing your little tech stuff?" Little. That word was still alive in her mouth after all these years, like she'd kept it in a drawer just for me. "Yeah," I said simply. "Work's good." She nodded like that, answered everything, and turned her head. "Ethan," she called toward the living room. "Your sister's here." Your sister, not my daughter, not Lena. Just a relationship label, like I was a guest arriving at the wrong party. Ethan was sprawled on the couch with a drink in his hand, one sock on, one off, watching football like the world owed him comfort. He muted the TV and stood up slowly, like he was doing me a favour by acknowledging my existence. "Well," he said, grin crooked, "if it isn't the quiet genius." He looked me up and down. Still single? Still building those, what do you call them, apps for anxious people? My mum watched my face like she expected me to laugh it off the way I used to. I didn't. "Nice to see you too," I said. My tone wasn't cold. It was neutral. And neutrality's terrifying to people who rely on your emotional reactions to control you. I followed my mum into the kitchen. She handed me a dish towel like nothing had changed. "Can you help with the salad?" she asked, already turning back to the oven. Then, without thinking, she poured a glass of wine and set it in front of Ethan. She poured one for herself. She didn't offer me any. She pointed at the tap water like it was automatic. It was such a small thing, but that's how favoritism works. Not in grand speeches. in tiny rituals that tell you over and over where you rank. I chopped vegetables while they talked about Ethan's next big idea. He had some plan, something vague and overconfident, something that sounded like a podcast summary. My mom nodded like he was already a success story. She kept saying, "This time is different." I listened, not because I cared, but because my therapist was right. I wasn't there to be loved. I was there to observe. And what I saw was painfully consistent. My mother's eyes lit up for him. He soaked it up like sunlight. And I remained the quiet helper in the kitchen, like the old script still had me cast as background. When she called us to the table, my pulse picked up anyway. Because even if you outgrow your family, your body still remembers the old pain like muscle memory. The table was set the same way as always. Ethan at one end, my mum near him, me off to the side, my old seat. I sat down in it and felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger, just clarity. Dinner started like a replay. My mum passed Ethan the mashed potatoes first, laughed at his jokes, asked about his plan like it was already funded. He launched into a rambling pitch about market gaps and timing and needing a little capital to get it off the ground. My mom nodded enthusiastically. "And of course," she said, glancing at me like she expected approval, "I told him I'd help. Help. Again. Always." The conversation rolled right past me like I wasn't even sitting there. They talked about Ethan's future, Ethan's connections, Ethan's comeback story. Then my mom finally turned to me briefly, like she remembered something she forgot on a grocery list. "So, Lena," she said, cutting her turkey, "you're still working, right? Still doing your computer thing?" My entire life reduced to computer thing. I set my fork down. "Yeah," I said. "Still working?" She smiled, relieved because my short answer meant she didn't have to ask anything deeper. "As long as you can pay your bills," she said. "That's what matters." Like I was a teenager babysitting for gas money. Ethan smirked. "Mum," he said, voice dripping with fake kindness. "You know Lena. She's fine. She's got her little project." Then he looked directly at me. The condescending glint, the childhood smirk, and the sentence that lit the fuse. "So," he said, slow and mocking, "are you still wasting your time on that worthless company?" There it was. Worthless. The same energy as every dismissal I'd ever swallowed. I didn't flinch. I didn't snap. I didn't even change my expression. I just looked at him and said casually, "Actually, I sold it." Silence. So fast I could hear the fridge hum in the next room. My mom froze. Ethan laughed. "You sold it." Air quotes again. "To who?" "A healthcare tech group," I said calmly. Saying the company name out loud in that house felt like introducing a stranger to a family that never acknowledged you existed. Ethan leaned back, scoffing. "Okay, so what did you get? Like a few 100,000? He was already comforting himself with the assumption that I couldn't possibly outshine him. "How much?" he pressed. "Seriously?" My mom's voice went quiet. "How much, Lena?" I let the silence stretch, just long enough to make them feel it. Then I said, clear and steady, 78 million. Ethan's jaw dropped. My mum's fork slipped and hit the plate. Her face drained so fast it looked like the room had lost oxygen. For a second, no one moved. No one breathed. Then everything happened at once. "That's not funny," my mum whispered. "Don't lie." Ethan snapped back, voice rising. "You're not that smart. Nobody pays that kind of money for some stupid app." I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the table. Not dramatically, not smug, just factual. Ethan grabbed it, hands shaking, and started scrolling like he could find a trapdoor. My mom leaned in, lips moving as she tried to count commas. Ethan's fingers were frantic, too fast for someone pretending not to care. Then he pulled up his own phone, typed for a few seconds, and froze, because the search results weren't rumours. They were public. My company, my name, the deal. Black and white. Ethan looked up at me like he was seeing a stranger. My mum's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. "How could you keep something like that from your own family?" I let out a short breath, a laugh, almost. "You mean the way you kept everything for Ethan?" I said. The words landed heavier than money ever could. I didn't yell. I didn't insult. I just listed reality. The expensive schools, the trips, the checks, the rescue missions, and the way my whole childhood had been built on one sentence. "You'll be fine." My mum's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted, searching for excuses. "That's not fair," she managed. "We did our best. We supported you." "No," I cut in, voice calm but sharp. "You supported him. You invested in him. You built your entire life around him. You told me I'd be fine so you didn't have to try." The table felt like it was vibrating. Ethan slammed his fist down hard enough to make the glasses jump. "So what?" he shouted. "You think you're better than us now?" Then he leaned forward, eyes wild. "You're still the same weird little sister. You just got lucky." I stood up slowly. My napkin slid off my lap onto the floor. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. Because the truth is, I'd rehearsed this moment my whole life. "Luck didn't build anything," I said quietly. "Luck didn't work 2 jobs. Luck didn't code at 2 a.m. Luck didn't turn down offers that felt wrong and lied into." Then I looked at my mom. Really looked at her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not because she was fragile, because her worldview had cracked. "You gambled everything on the wrong child," I said softly. And for the first time in my life, she had no comeback. She reached for my wrist like she wanted to pull me back into the old script. "Lena, wait," she pleaded. "We can talk about this. Maybe you could help. You could invest. Ethan just needs..." There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I was wrong." Just help Ethan. Even now. Even after everything. I pulled my wrist back gently, like removing myself from a trap. "I did stick together," I said. "For years. You just never noticed." Then I pushed my chair in, looked at them both once, and walked out. Not running, not crying, just leaving. And behind me, Christmas lights blinked lazily in the window, reflecting off 2 stunned faces that had finally realized something terrifying. The daughter they ignored wasn't invisible. She had simply been building a life without them. I didn't feel triumphant when I left that house. I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty. Like I had finally finished a sentence I'd been holding in for 20 years, and now there was nothing left to say. I drove back to my hotel in silence, the Christmas lights blurring past my windshield. When I got inside, I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. My phone sat face down beside me. For a few minutes, I almost hoped it would stay quiet. It didn't. The first messages came early the next morning. Long paragraphs from my mother, half guilt, half accusation. "You embarrassed your brother." That dinner wasn't the place for something like that. Family doesn't keep secrets. "You made us look foolish." Not "I'm sorry," not "I didn't know," just damage control. A few hours later, Ethan chimed in. He called me arrogant, ungrateful, claimed I had betrayed the family by humiliating him, accused me of thinking I was better than everyone now. I didn't respond. I had spent my entire childhood responding, explaining, justifying, softening myself to make other people comfortable. This time, Silence felt like the only honest answer. 2 days after Christmas, a letter arrived at my office. Not a text, not a call. A letter from a lawyer representing both my mother and Ethan. They were demanding $2.4 million as compensation for the years of housing, food, education, and emotional support they claimed they had provided me. Reading it felt surreal, like someone had put a price tag on a childhood they barely showed up for. I didn't even feel angry. I felt clear. I forwarded the letter to my attorney. He read it once, raised his eyebrows, and said, "They don't want money. They want control." Then he did something I hadn't expected. He attached documents, every tuition payment made on Ethan's behalf, every private school invoice, every check written for his failed ventures, every transfer my mother had made to support him. And next to my name, nothing. No private schools, no investments, no bailouts, just zeros. At the end of his response, my attorney wrote one sentence. "If this claim proceeds, we will have no choice but to submit these records as part of the public filing." The reply came less than 24 hours later. "We're dropping the matter. Let's forget the lawyers." There was still no apology, just retreat. That's when Ethan started unraveling. He was already angry, furious that I had passed him in a race he didn't even realize we were running. But anger without a safety net is dangerous. He drank more. He showed up late to his job at an electronics store. One afternoon, he snapped at a customer. Someone filmed it. The video spread in a local community group. People recognized him, the same guy posting online about his rich, heartless sister. Within a week, he was fired. His newest big idea never launched. Credit card debt piled up. A small business loan he didn't understand buried him faster than he expected. My mother did what she always did. She tried to save him. She refinanced the house, drained what little savings she had left, poured money into his chaos, the way she always had, believing that if she just gave enough, he would finally become the version of him she'd built her life around. It wasn't enough. Within a year, the house I grew up in was gone, sold to cover debts. My mother moved into a small apartment. Her health declined. Relatives who had quietly watched her worship Ethan for years began to pull away. Not because of me, because the truth had finally become visible. The next Christmas, I wasn't anywhere near that table. I was in Maui with friends who had become family people who knew my story without using it against me. We hiked, swam, sat on a balcony overlooking the ocean while I wired a donation to a non-profit that provides mental health care for women who can't afford it. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from a younger cousin. "I saw the article about you. I always thought I was crazy for feeling invisible in our family. Your story helped me." I told her she could call me anytime. She did. I became the mentor I had needed at 16. Months later, an envelope arrived at my office. Handwritten from my mother. She apologized. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but honestly, she admitted she had favored Ethan, that she had missed me, that it took seeing everything collapse for her to understand what she'd built. She asked if I could forgive her. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer, not because I was cruel, but because I had already done the forgiveness that mattered. I had forgiven myself for not being able to save her, fix her, or earn my way into being chosen. I didn't send money. I didn't rush back in. I didn't rebuild what she broke. Boundaries were the only way not to become another bad investment. Today, I run a new company, this one focused on mental health technology, tools that help people check in with themselves instead of disappearing for everyone else. I speak on panels sometimes, occasionally on stages. I tell pieces of my story not as a victory lap, but as a warning. Here's what I learned. Your worth is not measured by how loudly your parents clap, Favoritism doesn't just damage the child who's ignored, it cripples the one who's worshipped. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop standing in front of people who refuse to see you. My mother lost her house. My brother lost his excuses. And I lost the fantasy that one day they would magically become the family I needed. In return, I gained something far more valuable. A life I chose, built on my own terms, surrounded by people who show up. If you've ever been the invisible one, the you'll be fine child, maybe you don't have millions or headlines, but you do have a choice. You can keep waiting for them to see you, or you can start seeing yourself. And if you were sitting at that Christmas table, thank you for listening. If you've ever had someone twist your truth, drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because somebody out there needs this warning before it happens to them.